My name is Matt Laborde. I'm a program officer here with the Rapides Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited to talk about a problem that's not unique to Central Louisiana, but one that we're starting to pay attention to and be passionate about. We're very excited to be announcing a new grant opportunity today. Joining me today is going to be our Director of Programs, Miss Ashley Stewart. And she's going to give you a little bit of background about the foundation. We'll get into some data points about disconnected youth, and then we'll actually give an overview of our grant. So,
hello, thank you all so much for joining us, and welcome to this informational webinar on Reconnecting Cenla. For those of you who are not familiar with the Rapides Foundation, we've been around for over 25 years, serving 9 parishes in Central Louisiana. And our mission is to improve the health status of Central Louisiana. And our vision is to positively impact Central Louisiana by deploying resources to improve key factors of health status. And for us, when we talk about health status, we want people to live longer, free of disease and disability. We serve 9 parishes. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a map of Central Louisiana and the actual parishes that we serve. They're located right around Alexandria. Most of them are rural parishes. And all of our work and things that we fund must take place in those 9 parishes. We take a very broad approach to health, and we know that there's more than access to care that impacts a person's health. So we have 3 focus areas: healthy people, where we focus on healthy eating and active living, tobacco prevention and control, and substance and alcohol abuse, and also healthcare access, looking at giving people better access to primary and behavioral health services. We also focus on education, and education is one of the largest areas that we fund in, knowing that a level of educational attainment has direct relation to a person's health outcomes. And then finally, healthy communities. And under healthy communities, we work on economic development and also the social environment. And this particular funding opportunity that we're bringing to you today is under our economic initiative, and specifically around our workforce development work. So if you're familiar with disconnected youth, it's defined as people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are neither in school nor employed. Back in 2019, the Rapides Foundation had a Board of Trustees retreat where we looked at lots of different assessments to see if we can figure out what are the certain needs of our specific 9 parishes. And during that assessment and during that board retreat, we were introduced to this disconnected youth idea and to this particular data point that showed that over 20% of youth in our area between 16 and 24 are disconnected. And later on in the presentation, Matt is going to go into the actual specific details and the specific data. But this really resonated with our Board of Trustees. These are formative years. They're a critical time for young people to develop skills, earn credentials, and have experiences that will impact their future. Research shows that young adults who experience disconnection, once they are reconnected and get back engaged, they have significantly lower incomes, are less likely to be employed long-term, and have poorer health outcomes than their peers. And so this was something that we started paying really close attention to and doing additional research on to figure out how can we, as the Rapides Foundation, support efforts in the area to address this disconnected youth issue. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to just kind of tell you and give you the history about what we've done to this point and how we got to where we are. So Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. If anybody's familiar with the Rapides Foundation, y'all know we like to really have a good handle from a data perspective on what the problem is that we're trying to address. And so the way we did that for disconnected youth is we partnered with a group called Measure of America. They're a subset of the Social Science Research Council. And what they do is they take current data that's available. That's employment data, they take census data, and they try to look at well-being and opportunity in America. And the disconnected youth data point is one way they measure that well-being and opportunity. And so we partnered with them in 2019 to take a look at our area to get a local assessment of who these disconnected youth are, how many of them are out there, where they are, and just kind of some data points around that to help inform our work. So big picture, if you look at the service area, we have about 21.4% disconnected youth rate. So that means that 21.4% of our 16 to 24-year-olds are not in school and they're not working. That's almost double what the national average is. So whenever you look to break that out, that's roughly 6,000 or 7,000 youth in our service area. So to break that down a little bit, and I don't want y'all to get too cross-eyed with looking at all this data, but when you look at the information that's shown here, it shows that our rural parishes suffer from a substantially higher youth disconnection rate than our urban areas. And I say urban very loosely, knowing in Central Louisiana, we don't really have any large urban areas. So you take a look at it, Catahoula Parish is our highest rate of disconnection with over 40%. Then if you look at the surrounding parishes there, that disconnection rate in those rural parishes is substantially higher than it is for Rapides and Vernon parishes. One thing about the Measure of America study, they used so many data points to try to get this idea of youth disconnection that they kind of had to do some funky ways of subsetting out this data. So they use what's called public use microdata areas. So if you see on this chart, you have Puma 600 and Puma 700. So that Puma 600 is going to be your Wynn, Grant, LaSalle, Catahoula, Concordia, and Avoyelles parishes. And then your Puma 700 will be Rapides and Vernon. And all this shows is that we already know we have a substantially higher disconnection rate than our national peers. But even within our service area alone, our rural parishes have almost a double or more than double the rate of disconnection that our urban parishes do. So then when you break that data down even further, you try to say, okay, out of certain subsets, how many of those youth are going to be disconnected here? And this was probably one of the more shocking graphs that we looked at when we were starting to analyze this data. So this graph shows what percentage of a certain population is going to be disconnected. So 22% of females ages 16 to 24 in our area are disconnected. The number that jumps out to me, and obviously the highest, is that 52% of our 16 to 24-year-olds with no high school diploma are going to be disconnected. And then we break it down, 49%, almost half of the youth who have a disability are going to be disconnected. And this is just a verbal representation of what you saw on that screen. So who are most likely to be disconnected? There's 22 to 24-year-olds with no high school diploma, disabilities, youth who are mothers. Surprisingly enough, youth with only a high school diploma, a third of those people are still disconnected, so they're not in school and not working. And then we know that youth who live in rural areas, 27%. So they gave us a bunch of data, and then fortunately they gave us some recommendations on what to look for and how to start to address this problem. So the first thing they gave us is to continue to concentrate on high school graduation. As Ashley mentioned before, the foundation has done extensive work with our public K-12 school systems. I believe whenever our education initiative started, we had a 60% graduation rate. Well, now we're up to the low 80s in graduation rate. So fortunately, our work outside of disconnected youth specifically is still impacting and having positive outcomes. The second thing they gave us was what comes after high school. I noticed when people were starting to get admitted in, we had our partners from Career Compass here. We did a large grant with them to focus on youth who are matriculating from high school to post-secondary. So we're excited with that work, and that's ongoing right now. We know we have to focus on youth in more rural settings, and then most importantly, support those youth that are going to be in poverty because they have those higher rates of disconnection. So whenever we take all of those recommendations, we kind of split them up into two ways. And the two ways that you can substantially impact disconnected youth are going to be, one, to make sure that your students who are currently enrolled in the education system, that's going to be your high school and your post-secondary, make sure that they stay enrolled in that. And we call those retention strategies. And like I mentioned before, our Beyond Graduation proposal or a project has done laid a great foundation and framework for what we think is going to have some substantial outcomes at the end of that. But you have all of these youth over here who have dropped out or who have, like we saw, graduated and aren't working now, and we have to find a way to reconnect those youth into meaningful education and employment opportunities. And what we call those are going to be our reconnection strategies. So if you look at your retention strategies and your reconnection strategies, when you pair those together, you should have a substantial impact on your disconnected youth rate. So best practices for reconnecting these youth. We know that these individuals are going to face multiple barriers when they're seeking education and work opportunities. Our systems that we have now are difficult to navigate, And, getting to and from places, transportation is always a problem here, no matter what subsets you're working with. And it disproportionately affects our youth in rural areas. You have to specifically target youth, and they are often the ones who are most difficult to get into programming. So there is a substantial boots on the ground effort that has to be taken. And you have to have a real knowledge of your community and your community assets to know where those youth even are. That's been one of the biggest questions that we've had to answer here is when we look at our 9 parishes that we serve, where specifically are these disconnected youth? All of the successful models, if you look anywhere around the country of organizations that are impacting disconnected youth, every single one are going to focus on building that community capacity and partnerships. Us, the Rapides Foundation, know that we cannot do this work alone. So we're really trying to embrace that with this grant opportunity. We also know that each community has its own unique assets. You may have a very strong faith-based group in your area, or you may have a 4-year or 2-year community college campus in your area. But each of your communities have their own assets that y'all can use to leverage to impact this disconnected youth. Great. And then we know that community-led action and place-based strategies are the most effective. If the community is not bought into this, then we're not going to see the outcomes that we're looking for. So taking all of that into consideration, and then a couple forms of meetings and listening to people, what's going on out there, we decided that we had to issue this grant opportunity, what we're calling Reconnecting Cenla. And it's a program grant, so the Reconnecting Cenla program grant. So this is what everybody's probably the most excited to hear about. So this grant is going to be up to $300,000 for a 3-year period. And the idea is that we are going to fund local anchor organizations to create community-based systems to recruit and navigate these opportunity youth or disconnected youth to education and employment opportunities. We'd love to have them both if possible. So who is an anchor organization? They can be a nonprofit organization, a faith-based organization, government or municipalities, post-secondary institutions, but they need to have significant presence, reputation, history, capacity within their community to implement these large community-wide partnerships. They also probably need to have substantial grants experience of implementing large grants for multiple years and show success of that. But in addition to those anchor organizations, the success of these grants are going to rely on partnerships with community organizations to recruit and to address those specific barriers that you face, because we know there are many. So the question I get asked whenever we were putting this together is, what does this actually look like? And I've tried to put it as concisely as possible here. So in the box, you see that we are going to fund an anchor organization, and they're going to be responsible for developing this community-wide system. So they're going to have recruitment partners who are going to be responsible for actually getting those youth into the anchor organization to get them to services. You're going to need to have partners to provide wraparound services. You're going to need to provide partners to actually give them outcomes. So like I mentioned before, education and employment is the goal of this grant, to connect those disconnected youth to those opportunities. So you'll need to have post-secondary partners, local employers, workforce training, and I know we have our WIBs and our Career Solutions Center there as well to make great partners to get them to those outcomes. So each anchor organization, if you're interested in being one of those, you're going to have some non-negotiable activities that you're going to need for this. The first being you have to identify a minimum of 3 community partner organizations to assist with recruiting and navigating youth to those outcomes. And I get asked, why do we use 3? And looking across our area, we know that we have some very rural parishes that we serve. We have some larger parishes that we serve, and each of those have unique assets. So I want to go ahead and say that while we put a minimum of 3 here, we expect that to reflect the size of your population scope. So for any of my Rapides people in here, my Natchitoches people, 3 is probably not going to be a sufficient number for your system. You're probably going to need to have, substantially more than that to make sure that you're meeting all of the needs of these disconnected youth. Those anchor organizations are going to be responsible for building and coordinating local system activities. Those are going to be those referral and navigation activities. We're going to need you to track those outcomes for those individuals that are served. In addition, we're also going to be developing a regional working group. I would love to say that we've come up with a really fancy and catchy name for that. We haven't got that far yet. But everyone who is going to be funded and who is going to participate in this grant are going to be required to participate in that working group so we can share best practices and provide information to those partners to make sure we are not only working effectively in our individual communities, but that we're working effectively on a region-wide basis. And then additionally with that, any technical assistance that we have, we would like for you to take advantage of as well. So what do those anchor and community partner organizations look like? And there are some nuances here, which is why we have this slide. So an anchor organization, this is the person who we're going to be directly giving funds to implement this project. So they must be an eligible nonprofit organization or governmental entity. Faith-based organizations are also included in here as long as they meet those capacity requirements that we were talking about before. They need to have a significant presence, reputation, and history within their community. So we want these people who have deep-rooted partnerships and existing clout within their community to really help make this push forward. They need to be able to implement large-scale community-wide partnerships and handle large sums of money to put those community partnerships to work. And they're going to be ultimately responsible for coordinating all of the activities within their system. Whenever we're developing this, I try to use the analogy of a quarterback, right? So they are the ones who are responsible for getting the balls to the playmakers to ultimately get that result that we want to have. But like I mentioned before, the success of this is going to really rely on these community partner organizations. So these can be a grassroots organization. If you have a fantastic, rec league that meets to play sports, and there are disconnected youth that actively go to that, they are a fantastic community partner for this. I think that any proposal that doesn't have faith-based organizations, your local churches involved, is doing yourself a disservice. The faith-based population, especially in central Louisiana, is so strong. And while you may not be directly targeting the youth with those partnerships, you target their parents and their grandparents who really sometimes make the decision on what's going to happen with those youth to connect them to those opportunities. All of our nonprofits that we work with in our day-to-day and the ones that we don't work with, they are still eligible to be a community partner organization. And then our municipalities, I believe I saw some people from the city of Alexandria, the city of Pineville, and the city of Natchitoches on here. But even our smaller towns and villages, if they have some programming set up, they're going to be a great community partner to have for this as well. So these community partners, they need to have a direct line of communication to the communities that they serve. These are like your frontline recruiters almost, to make sure that you get those youth into your programs. They're going to assist with that recruitment. And then they could also potentially provide services to meet the needs of youth within the program. So it's titled the Youth Reconnection Network, but this just kind of gives a visual of what we envision this will look like. So we're going to have our regional partners. Rapides Foundation will be there. We hope to have our post-secondary regional workforce partners, adult education providers, and our social service providers. Then we're going to be funding those anchor organizations to actually do this work. To be upfront about this, we are anticipating we're probably going to be able to fund 10 to 12, depending on what the total ask is for those. So you see here, we are hoping to disperse that as equally among rural and urban parishes that we can. But if you're from a rural area that may serve 2 or 3 parishes, you are absolutely okay to submit a proposal that will be a multi-parish. Or if you serve region-wide, we would absolutely love to see a proposal to implement a region-wide, community-based system that works in connection with this network. And then, like I said, the largest part of this network is also going to be those community organizations. This just gives you a general idea of what types of organizations could be community partners. That is obviously a not limited to. So if you see anyone in your community that works well and would be a great community partner, they can absolutely be added to your system as well. So projects need to tie these grant-funded activities directly back into recruiting and navigating youth to education and employment services. So recruiting and navigating, education and/or employment services. If you need to give a quick elevator speech, just say those 4 words repeatedly, and that gives you the purpose of this grant. But whenever we talk about these services, we are very specific in what outcomes we want. So for education services, we are defining those as reconnecting them to their public school districts, specifically for those 16, 17, and 18-year-olds who are still eligible to go back, and I guess 19-year-olds could as well, who can go back into those K-12 systems. That'll be your HiSET test providers, alternative education programs, credit or non-credit programs, but they need to be issued by an accredited nonprofit post-secondary institution. And then any other sort of workforce training programs that are provided by organizations that result in an industry-based credential. On the employment side, outcomes should look like direct placement with employers, enrollment into your local American Job Center site services or your local Workforce Development Board services, or enlistment into local military or recruitment office. So when you look at these services and these outcomes, if you can take someone who is not currently involved in either of these things and bring them into one of these services, then they will no longer be a disconnected youth, which is the ultimate goal for this program. So like I said, what do positive outcomes look like? Absolutely, including but not limited to earning a high school diploma or equivalent, earning relevant IBCs, enrollment into a post-secondary, enlistment in the Armed Services branch, or placement with a local employer. So while you're kind of thinking about this, another large question you're going to need to answer is, how are you planning on tracking these participant outcomes and referrals? There are a million different CRM, client resource management systems out there that help you track progress for a certain activity. I know Salesforce is one that a lot of people use. You may have your own CRM data for your programs that you have that you track. I know there is a group called Unite Us. They are a coordination referral service that's no charge to nonprofits. They may be someone to look at. But no matter which way you choose, you're going to need to have a coordinated referral system in place. One of the biggest disservices that we could do is bring a youth into services, say, hey, you have the drive to go get a job or go back to school. We bring them into services, we refer them to someone else, and then nothing ever happens. So that is a way of making sure that everyone is accountable and doing their part to really address this problem. And like I said, that can look unique for whatever your system decides to build out. Eligibility requirements. So like we mentioned before, eligible anchor organization. So your anchor organization, once again, is going to be the person who physically receives funds and then coordinates the activities in their area. So eligible anchor organizations for this funding opportunity could be those community-based, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, governmental organizations. But you have to meet these requirements below. You need to be classified as a Section 501c3 or a government entity. You cannot be a private foundation under Section 509A. If you look on your 990 form, it will tell you whether or not the IRS has determined if you're a private foundation or not. And you must be an organization within our 9 parish service area. So once again, $300,000 that are available for up to a 3-year period. The grant term is going to be 36 months. These grants need to start April 1st, 2023, and they'll be ending at the end of the first quarter, March 31st in 2026. You can only submit one application as an anchor organization, but an organization can be listed as a community partner in multiple applications, or you can be listed as an anchor organization that you physically apply for, but could also be considered a community partner in someone else's application. This is also going to be a 2-stage grant process. And so everybody always kind of gives me a deer in the headlights look whenever we say that. So what that means is, come August, we're going to need a letter of intent from you. And I'll get into the specifics of what you need to have in that letter of intent. But you'll have to submit a letter of intent. And then we will take it to our board and say, here is a 2 to 4 page letter of intent that these community organizations gave us that is their best idea for how they're going to build these systems and connect these youth. Our board will then take, hopefully we get 10 to 12 that are fundable. They'll take those and then they'll say, yes, we invite these to submit a full proposal, which will come later. So the first stage is going to be that LOI that everybody needs to submit, and then we'll have a submission for a full proposal that only those invited LOIs will be able to submit for. I hope that makes sense. So another important thing everybody asks is, okay, so we can ask for $300,000, but how can we spend that money? So the thing we anticipate the most is going to be staff time. That can be existing staff, or if you believe that your organization really needs a dedicated full-time staff person, that is allowable under this. Recruitment activities, these can be things like events, or if you need to have some small marketing or whatever. But you need to tie those expenses directly back to how you're coordinating these disconnected youth. We don't need anybody throwing parties with Rapides Foundation funds just for the sake of throwing parties. It needs to be to bring those youth into services. If you need to have contract services with someone like a recruitment service or things like that, that is allowable under this. Coaching, counseling, and mentor activities. That hands-on piece to have the youth get someone that they can trust and that can help them along the way. That is an eligible use of time or funds for this. Education and career awareness activities. Advocacy, community education. Like we mentioned before, that participant tracking software, which is going to be vital to the success of all these programs. And then communications and marketing to get the word out about your program and to really help that recruitment piece. And then the last piece here, we are also allowing 10% of your grant funds to go to participant support services. So we know that these youth are going to be facing a multitude of barriers, and that can be things like transportation. It may be parents who have to figure out dependent care. Work-related attire or tools. If you have to get scrubs to go to school and you can't afford that, we don't want that to be a barrier. But with that, the assistance cannot be given to those individuals. So I can't go write Ashley a check for gas vouchers directly to her. I would have to give it to an organization that can coordinate those activities. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And those assistance funds need to be clearly explained and how they directly tie back to those grant activities. Non-allowable expenditures, you'll see in here. We do not supplant existing resources. So if you're already, you have a staff person that's paid to do a job, we don't want to supplant that. No lobbying or political programs or events. None of the research here. Projects outside the foundation service area. Everything needs to stay within our 9 parishes. And specifically no vans or other vehicles. And you can look to the RFP. It's on the Rapides Foundation website. It'll give you all the details of allowable and non-allowable expenditures. So, like I mentioned before, we have a 2-stage proposal. Letter of intent is going to be due August 9th, and we will let those accepted LOIs know September 30th. Then, once you are invited to submit a full proposal, those are going to be due on January 13th, 2023, and we will notify our actual funded projects on March 3rd of 2023. Only applicants with that accepted letter of intent are going to be eligible to submit a full proposal. One thing that we always encourage people to do is, if you are thinking about submitting an application as an anchor organization, please call a foundation staff person. That'll be me, Matt Laborde, to talk about your project. I'd love to hear what's going on. And I can't tell you, yes, this is a great idea, it will absolutely be funded, but I can try to make sure everything is within line and eligible under the RFP. For your LOIs, once again, that's going to be what's due on August 9th. Those are going to be 2 to 4 pages, and they're only going to be accepted through the Rapides Foundation's online portal. Another thing I want to note is, everybody sees online portal and kind of gets a little nervous. We are here to help with those, but you want to make sure that you're going to be submitting those proposals in enough time that we can help you if you have any issues with the online portal. And so those are going to need to be submitted, full proposals need to be submitted by January 20th of 2023. Oh, I realized we have a mix up on dates there. That due date's actually going to be January 13th. And that's reflected on the RFP as well. So I know that's kind of like drinking from a fire hose of what we are looking for here. And I have a feeling we probably have some questions here. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now. And you may be muted if you're trying to say something.
Hi, Matt.
Hey.
Can you kind of go over the mentoring? You talked about mentoring earlier, and I was trying to write everything down. How can that be used?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do here, we know that each of these systems are going to look differently, right? And so each system may want to utilize certain things. So for mentoring, it needs to be directly tied back to those education and employment opportunities. But let's say you have someone who is interested in becoming, an RN, and you have a nurse mentor that is out there. If you need to facilitate some of those activities to partner them up with a mentoring program, those funds can be allowed for that. Now, we don't want to be building large, mentoring and coaching and counseling programs. That is only a small piece of what your system should look like. But it's allowable under there. What we tried not to do was eliminate any good ideas that people may have for this. So this is kind of an all-encompassing list of allowable expenses.
Okay.
I know that's not a great answer, but without asking, like, I specifically want to do this, it's kind of hard to answer.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt, this is Ben Nugent-Peterson, the organizer with Central Louisiana Interfaith. My question is, do y'all have any examples of, like that slide you showed with the inner circle and the outer circle and the outer circle? There were so many different organizations and types of organizations involved in that big sort of universe. Do y'all have any case studies or examples about how an effective system operated and was set up and what that looked like and who was involved with it?
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody, kind of the main thought leader through disconnected youth and opportunity youth is what they use, is the Aspen Institute. They're a national leader in this, and they had what's called the Opportunity Youth Forum. It was a program they had, and they implemented, it was on a little bit larger scale than what we're looking at here, but they found actual anchor organizations in certain states and gave them funds to build their local system. So I would say the Aspen Opportunity Youth Forum is going to be one of the national models to look at for that.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And like I said, with this too, and one thing that we have when we're developing this is we know that each of these communities are going to look different. So one model that may have worked, may not work for your community. And unfortunately, we don't work and we're not nearly as close to y'all's communities as you are. So these are just general ideas, but it can look any way you need to look.
Something else that we provided in the request for proposal, which is found on the foundation's website, at the very end of it, there are some links to research and to different organizations that are working in this area. So that would also be a great place for you to look, and just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that there are some links at the bottom of that RFP document that will kind of give you some better understanding of what disconnected youth are, what some of the challenges are, and also what are some of the best practices and people that are working in that area.
Thanks, Ashley.
Teresa, I'm looking back at the chat box now. So $300,000 is going to be the total that each grant can ask for. So that's the maximum allowable for any one grant request. But I will caveat that with, just because you can ask for $300,000, if you do not need $300,000, then we'd recommend not asking for the full amount.
Understood. Thank you.
Matt, this is Akeisha.
Hey, Keisha.
Hey, I was going to add to Benjamin's question. There's also another group called mdrc.org, and they actually have a database of programs that specifically work on reconnecting youth. So that might also be another place you could look, and it actually identifies the educational and employment outcomes that you would see from using those models. So just another resource, if it's not already on the list, y'all provide it, Matt.
Akeisha, if you wouldn't mind, if it's easy to do, can you just throw that in the chat box, a link to that organization? Thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, Carlisa, I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question a little bit better. I need to know kind of more specifics around that mentoring program before I could tell you official thumbs up or thumbs down. Those are all fantastic questions, though. Does anybody else have anything? All right, well, I'm going to get into now. So I mentioned briefly about our online submission portal, and I'm going to skip through all of our slides here just to show you what that's going to look like so you don't have any shock when it comes to the submission process. So if you go to our website, www.rapidsfoundation.org, and you click on the grants tab, it'll be the Reconnecting Cenla program grant. This is going to be your main homepage for that grant opportunity. So whenever you go to submit your letter of intent, and I know it says that it's due August 9th at 1 p.m., but everybody should be in there earlier than August 9th uploading these, hopefully. You're going to go to the side box over here where it says submit a letter of intent. And the first time you go into our grant account, you're going to click start a new application. Anytime after that, be sure you click the return to my application page. Otherwise, you're going to keep creating new versions of the same thing, and you're not going to have your work saved. Once again, this is only going to be for those anchor organizations who want to actively and directly apply for funding. Now, if you want to be a community organization that is going to participate with an anchor organization, you do not need to have to go through this process. So once you click on that Start My Application, if you have an existing account, if you've worked with the Rapides Foundation, or if you apply for Rapides Foundation grant, you should have a login already. If not, you can click New Applicant and it'll take you through all the steps you need to. Our fabulous programs admin, Courtney Keys, she can help you with any questions that you have related to the online grants portal. So we'll have a quick eligibility quiz for you. If you meet all those requirements of the RFP, you also meet all of these requirements, but it's an easy and quick way for us to fill out or to filter out who is eligible and who's not eligible for funding. Then this will take you to the actual RFP. So this is just an HTML version of the PDF that we have on our website. And you'll go through, you'll ask for general information. So if we were going to be applying for this theoretically, organization name is Rapides Foundation, our street address, and then you have your geographic area that's served. That's going to be very important. Like I said, we are really trying to emphasize dispersion of these grants. We want to make sure that all of our rural, or that we have rural and urban representation here. So please be sure to click that geographic area. And then your contact information. So there are two types of contact information we have here. The first is going to be your organization's primary contact. So that's going to be your executive director, your president, CEO, their information. Then if the person who is not the primary contact is the one who is going to be implementing this grant, or if the one who's applying for it, they're going to need to have their information below. So if it's the same as organization primary contact, you click the box. If not, you put all that information in for the project coordinator or project manager, or project director, or whatever. You'll need to have a project title. It's always interesting to see what kind of titles some people come up with. I encourage everyone to try to be shorter rather than longer in your title names, because all of our grants management system is tied back to this. So if you have a 10-word project title, anytime we generate documents or go to look up your grant, it's going to be that 10-word title. So shorter is going to be better. Also with your project description, it says briefly describe your project objective. So please kind of keep that in mind. 1 to 2 sentences that are very concise that gets the point across. Your project start dates and end dates should align with what we ask for in the RFP. Your requested amount cannot be more than that $300,000, but your total project budget, including other funding sources, can exceed that. So what that means is we can only give you $300,000 for this project. But if you have other funding, which we strongly encourage everyone to try to get, you'll put that total budget in that spot right there. And then once again, your geographic area. So here's where you will actually upload all of your grant documents. I always tell everyone it seems to work best for your long narratives if you do it in a Word document and then you upload it that way, or if you're having to submit multiple documents for your LOI, to do it in PDF form. So, as you're working through it and drafting out your LOI, you click that upload box, upload it up to there. We'll need a 990 report. So if you're a nonprofit, that's going to be your typical 990. I know some of our institutions, like our post-secondary institutions, don't have a specific 990. They have their audit statements. Those are also an acceptable way to meet that requirement. On our website, we have an application signature page, and this is a document that we need your executive director or whoever is over your organization to actually sign. And what that says is that they give their blessing for you to submit this grant proposal. We hope they have read it. We strongly encourage them to read it and to really buy into it. That way, if it's accepted, we know it's going to be from a top-down buy-in. And then we'll need your IRS determination letter. Like I said, that once again filters out any of those private foundations that we cannot fund. And if your organization doesn't have an IRS termination letter because you're a municipality or a post-secondary institution, your kind of articles of incorporation or things like that are also allowed. And then we have I forgot to mention the project budget worksheet and narrative. That is where you're going to give us a line item budget of what you're actually going to be using these funds for. There's a template on the foundations page. I'll go back to that in a second. But you're also going to need to accompany a narrative with it. So let's say you ask for $200,000 for staff costs. Well, we're going to need to know, what are those staff doing? How did you get to that number? You know, we have one person on salary plus their fringe benefits. We need you to go in and actually explain those line items to you. And once again, you know, I know this is kind of a lot of information. If you have any specific questions, feel free to give me a call and I can walk you through all of it.
So Matt, there was a couple of questions that came in while you were talking. Dr. Young asked, she said she is an organization that works with getting assistance with post-secondary opportunities, and she wants to know, how would she connect with anchor organizations?
Yes, so that's going to be, you know, after we get out of this webinar, we're going to be sharing these slides on our website and all that. But we also want to make sure that everyone within the communities that are going to be built know who are other players in there. So Ashley and I have been talking about it. We are actually going to be setting up some follow-up meetings in our parishes. If you register for this event, we will send you an email. We have your contact information. We'll send you an email of what our schedule is going to be like for those follow-up meetings. Once you see that, I do encourage you to invite other partners who work in this space. But that'll be a chance for, if you were thinking about being an anchor organization, you can come and kind of explain what your organization does. And you're not explaining this to us, you'll be explaining it to the community who's looking to develop an application. Or if you're thinking about being a community partner, you can go to these meetings and say, hey, you know, I don't have the capacity, or we don't have the organizational setup to implement this program, but we'd like to help in recruitment, or we can provide services for this population, or X, Y, and Z. So there will be some targeted facilitation after this that we'll be having, and we'll send that schedule out probably either tomorrow or early next week, try to finalize that.
I did want to let everyone know, while we're on this page right here with the presentations, that the on the website, that this presentation will be available probably early next week, and you will be able to find it in the key materials section on this page right here on the Foundation's website. Yes,
and then this register for the webinar button is also going to change to be view this webinar. So people in the future, hopefully we have people who get on it and look at the recording. But you'll be able to go and click that button and re-listen to this as well. And I do want to highlight over here, so all those documents that we talked about uploading, your budget worksheet, your budget narrative, your signature page, all of those are going to be found on that right-hand side under key materials. If you click on the link, it'll automatically download.
Matt, we had another question from Dorothy Oliver and LaSalle CAA. She, as a WIOA provider, would those resources be considered additional funding?
So you mean like I would say they can be in kind, I would think. I know WIOA funding comes from the feds, and it's not necessarily targeted to this project. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap there. I would probably list that as in kind, but not additional. And there's a space for that on that budget worksheet. Whenever you download it, it has a space for in-kind dollars and additional funds. So. Do you have any other follow-up questions? Okay, Ash, is there anything else in the chat box that you see?
No, it looks like we covered them all.
And like I said, I know a lot of times this is people's first time hearing about this. So, I am here to help. I don't know if I actually included, if you look on the grants page, you'll have my contact information. If you have a pin close by, it'll be Matt, M-A-T-T, @rapidsfoundation.org. Email is typically the best way to get a hold of me. And if we need to set up a phone call or something, we can definitely do that. But so if you have any questions as you're building this out, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to work on a schedule to have some follow-up meetings in our actual parishes to try to further these conversations. And that's going to be an opportunity for you, like I said, whether you want to be an anchor organization or a community organization, to come to this event and let everybody know what your services are, what you can provide to help these disconnected youth, and then hopefully come together to try to build out a proposal, not for that meeting, but to let everybody know who are players in their community for that. And like Benjamin asked and Ashley mentioned again, if you look on the RFP, there are some resources at the very bottom. There are additional resources on there. And that takes you through a lot of those best practices and national models that you have that you can look to when you're forming your proposal. Yep, thanks for putting my contact information there, Ashley. All right, everybody. Well, I will give you the rest of your afternoon back. Like I said, if you have any questions, just reach out. We're happy to help. Thank you so much.